The Bible inspired the Declaration of Independence. We got our system of government from the Bible. Don't talk to me about that flag out yonder or that sign out yonder. This is our country. And it was our country long before they ever came across the waters and got over here. My country 'tis a...
Excerpts from the short documentary Nator's Grocery. It premieres tonight as part of the POV Shorts on PBS. We're joined by the film's director, Nadine Nator. She's an associate producer on the Oscar-nominated film RBG. Nadine here is telling her own family story. Those are her parents who run the grocery store. She's the oldest of 4 daughters. Nadine, thanks so much for joining us on Democracy Now! We don't have much time, and I want you to get to the heart of the story. You're growing up in one of the most conservative areas of the United States, and how, from you to your youngest sister, you feel the area has changed.
Thanks so much for having me, Amy. Yes, so while I was growing up, I really didn't pay that much attention to being Muslim, to being Arab. My parents came from Palestine, and it was just sort of part of growing up. We're a secular family, didn't pay too much attention to that. But as the years progressed and we saw different administrations come and go, and the climate for American Muslims became a bit more worrisome. So in the election of Donald Trump, we saw a lot of that bubbling racist sentiment towards immigrants, towards Muslim, become part of the mainstream discourse. And whereas I really never thought about it, when it comes to my youngest sister, who you see in the film, she fended off ignorant comments or attacks on her heritage as she was going through school. So you really could see a shift in the attitude towards Muslims, towards immigrants, and especially with the election of Donald Trump, the underlying discourse sort of was brought out into the open.
Your father is known as G by the community as he runs Nator's Grocery. His name actually is Jihad, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Did he shorten it because he felt it might not go over well in this part of the country?
At the time, I don't think that association was being made yet. And he probably just wanted people to have the ease of saying a name quickly, just as many immigrants are looking for ways to sort of adapt and blend in with the community that becomes their new home. But yes, his name is Jihad.
And after 9/11, how you felt?
After 9/11, there wasn't necessarily a huge shift in my experience, but for someone, my sister was born the day after. So for someone like her, it really made a difference in the way that she experienced, feeling like a part of the town. But this was what I really wanted to explore in the film, was that we really felt a tremendous amount of love from the people in our town. And it was interesting to me to talk to our customers and people in Appomattox about why they voted for someone who was saying anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim sentiments as part of their campaign and as part of their platform. And I think it's important that no matter, who gets into office in the next election, that we sort of make sure we can protect the Muslim America as part of the country.
And I wanted to bring in Julie Cohen, finally, the producer of this film, who also produced and directed the Oscar-nominated film RBG. Julie, why you got involved with Nadine's film?
First of all, because of my belief in Nadine as a filmmaker, but also just the story of her family is so incredible. I mean, you hear those sound bites at the beginning and that you were mentioning of Donald Trump saying, Muslims hate this country. I mean, when you see this film, Nadine's family represents in every way so beautifully the American dream. And to think that there's this huge misunderstanding at best and, just really, really ugly hatred at worst is just feels like it's a misunderstanding that really needs some clearing up. And Nadine has done a gorgeous job of doing that.
And Julie, as you did RBG, your thoughts today on what is the probable confirmation vote for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett? We have 15 seconds.
Well, it looks like it's happening. If there were ever a time that we needed a voice of dissent, what Justice Ginsburg so beautifully provided, it's now. I think, with the threat of rights being peeled back, I think many of us are concerned.
We have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Julie Cohen and 18 Natura.
This is KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. This week on Peggy's Place, we are simulcasting the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium. That's up next, right after a word from our sponsor.
One of the greatest threats to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. Well, Judy and Frank Mello of Point Arena are doing their part with the B. Bryan Preserve, which is actively committed to the breeding and preservation of endangered African hoofstock. Their daily 1-hour tour around this 110-acre preserve gives you a close-up look of various endangered zebra, giraffe, and antelope as they roam about. You get to feed the giraffe and just might get a kiss from one of the giraffe boys. Want to stay among the animals? Then book one of B. Bryan's quaint cottages.
B. Bryan Preserve in Point Arena, California, and online at bbryanpreserve.com. To book your tour or stay, call 707-882-2297 today.
On the next Living on Earth, hiking as a drag queen.
So when I do drag in the outdoors, I feel the most me. And yes, that means literally backpacking in high heels, which you can think is a very silly and stupid and dangerous thing, but so is riding a mountain bike down a mountain at 45 miles an hour.
I'm Bobby Bascom. Unicycle. The outdoors. That's next time on Living on Earth from PRX.
Welcome to Peggy's Place. I'm Lindsey, your host for our special simulcast event this week of October 26th, the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium, brought to you by Mendonoma Whale and Seal Studies Scott and Tree Mercer and KGUA Public Radio on the Pacific Ocean in Wallala, California. For the next few days, you'll discover the status of our oceans and the life forms that inhabit them, presented by a variety of ocean experts, including the Ocean Foundation's Richard Charter, Ocean Conservation Research's Michael Stalker, University of New Hampshire's Carter Mercer, Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's Marianne Long, Redlands University's Tessa Foster, Noyo Center for Marine Sciences Sarah Grimes, Blue Planet Solutions Zack Klyver, and today's three guests. That would be BioWave's Jeff Jacobson, Orca Network's Howard Garrett, and Aquatic Research Conservancy's London Fletcher. The topics include how climate change is affecting our oceans, killer whale cultural biology, the leopard seal population outside the Antarctic, the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale, acoustical adaptations to the ocean's dark and wet environment, and the pursuit of ropeless fishing for lobster and crab, which helps protect all marine life from being caught up in fishing lines. You can watch this Ocean Life Symposium live on KGUA's YouTube TV channel, which we will share on Facebook pages of both KGUA and the Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study. You can listen at 88.3 FM locally and online worldwide at kgua.org. Just click Listen Live and save the KGUA Air Pocket. app to your smartphone, tablet, or computer. We are also on apps Radio Garden and TuneIn. Please note that Radio Garden and TuneIn are available in your app stores, but the KGUA Air Pocket web app by Radio Rethink is only available at kgua.org. Our first guest is Jeff Jacobson of BioWaves, who will give us a rapid review about killer whale cultural biology. Jeff is a senior marine biologist of BioWaves who has a wide range of experience and professional skills in studying the ocean and marine life. He collaborates on a diverse set of projects from stem cell research to contaminants. His professional skills include passive acoustic monitoring, which includes both analog and digital underwater acoustic recording of marine mammal vocalizations. Since 1977, he has been a cetacean research biologist in locations throughout the North Pacific and has a long-time familiarity with the Inside Passage from the Southeast Alaska to Puget Sound and the coastal waters of Northern California and Oregon. He does photographic identification of whales and dolphins, and since 1994, he has been a field biologist doing surveys of seabirds and their behavior. He continues a variety of long-term survey efforts of Northern California killer whales, humpback whales, gray whales, blue whales, seabirds, and albacore. Please welcome Jeff Jacobson to the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium. Welcome, Jeff. Let's see if your mic is on.
Testing one.
You are
Good.
Live with us today. Thank you.
And now share screen, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And
there we go.
good to go to full screen. Presentation. Is that working?
That's perfect, Jeff.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, hang on, folks. This is going to be fast. I'm going to try to cram in a quick review of what has been learned in the last 50 years since killer whales were first started being studied in the wild, all leading up to an aspect of culture and evolution that is quite similar to us in so many ways, yet incredibly different. Okay, well, first off, killer whales are the largest dolphin. I'm going to use orca and killer whale interchangeably here. They're the largest dolphin, and dramatically, the males are very much larger than the females. We call sexual dimorphism, which I like to represent here in the size of their pectoral fins, their hidden hands and arms these are both adult animals, an adult male and adult female. So starting around 1965, wild killer whales are being captured around Vancouver Island and put into tanks for public display, taught to do tricks, etc. Then the question started to arise, well, how many killer whales are out there? Is this harvest sustainable? Well, what needed to be known, figured out, was the population size, how many were out there, what the birth and death rates were, the home range of these animals, how far did they travel, and what was the social structure in amongst these highly developed dolphins, and what were they eating? What was their diet? But how do you go figure that out in wild animals, let alone a killer whale that you're only going to see at the surface briefly? Well, Mike Biggs started to look into this in 1970, and he eventually figured out that and developed individual photographic identification 2 years later. Ken Balcom joined in soon therein and still at it, along with many, many, many others in this era and now around the world. Well, photographic identification, all animals do not look alike. So if you document their natural markings, you've essentially tagged that individual whale without sticking anything in them. And you can now follow their life histories. Turns out that there were far fewer killer whales than expected, and the exact number was known out there. Again, it wasn't a whole lot of them. It was the same ones over and over again. Individuals were always found traveling in their same groups, their family groups called pods. Turned out that they were long-lived, slow to reproduce, and slow to die. And it was decided that the harvest was not sustainable, and captures in this area ended in 1981. So here's a page out of the photo ID catalog. You can download these things now. You can buy them in bookstores. You can identify the animals swimming off your shores using these guides. Briefly, each pod was given a letter, and then each individual in the pod was given a number. This page alone is probably worth a half an hour of explanation, description. You've got the sex of the individual, their birth date, whether it's known exactly, if they were born during the study or estimated, and the lineage. You got grandma here in the top, her 2 sons, her 2 daughters, her daughter's kids on the bottom. Early on, it was observed that these whales that were frequently seen in the Inside Passage had it divided into 2 fairly distinct ranges, the northern community, northern Vancouver Island, all the way up to Prince Rupert, and the southern community, just 3 pods in the Puget Sound Salish Sea area. So what was a resident pod? Well, they were observed almost daily when the salmon were migrating through the Inside Passage. They were observed to only hunt salmon, and it seemed like they prefer Chinook salmon over the other salmon species that were migrating. They're fussy eaters. And the pods, well, they're a matriline, a female and her daughters, and then eventually her granddaughters, as we saw on the page. And this includes the sons and the grandsons. A very unique thing amongst social mammals, that there's no dispersal by males from a resident pod natal group. The boys stay with mom until death do them part. When pods get large, when her daughters have lots of kids, they eventually divide along matrilines, especially when food isn't so concentrated, but they all get together now and then and interact. So life history became known of these whales. We knew their exact ages, or they could be estimated. Turns out females live around up to 50 years or so, on average 45 to 50 years, but can survive up into their 80s. Males, a lot less, lived around 30 years of age, but can survive into their 50s. So their reproductive life history, well, males start sprouting their dorsal fins at around 15 years of age when they become sexually mature. And they finish growing at about the age of 21 years. And it turns out from the genetics that has been done that only a few males in the group sire most of the calves. This fits in with their sexual dimorphism in that it tends to correlate with polygyny, yet another story for another time. Females, however, well, they have their first calf. They were observed with their first calves at about age to 12 to 14 years. And there seems to be a average 5-year interval between their calves. So again, a slow calving rate. However, we only knew the calves that had survived long enough to be photographed for their first time. And it turns out that there's a rather high neonate mortality rate. Within the first 6 months of life, many of them die. Not sure why. Reproductive life for females ends at around 40 to 45 years. They stop having calves, but continue living. Well, hang on, let's do some maths. Females can live up to 80 years old, but they stop reproducing at 40 to 45 years? This begs the question. What do human and killer whale females have most in common? Not a trick question, it's obvious. Menopause, AKA a post-reproductive life. Resident killer whales have become the best studied population for this among animals. And in killer whales, post-reproductive life lasts around 15 to 30 years. That's a long time. It's post-reproductive life is only observed in humans, killer whales, and 3 other species of toothed whales, the pilot, the beluga, and the narwhal. So how do these non-productive females contribute to their pods? Surely they have to have a role, because there is a cost to maintaining the group. Well, food provisioning of close kin has been observed, especially to the young calves. So they are actively catching fish and giving the fish to their calves, which by investing in their calves, they're increasing their inclusive fitness, the survival of their offspring's offspring, and also will reduce the interbirth interval of their daughters. All this has been established and documented. Being the oldest in the group, they have a lot of knowledge, long-lived, large-brained, and it turns out in one study in the Salish Sea area that when salmon became scarce, the grandmas were more often leading the pod as they were traveling to find food. Well, their sons, they reproduce till they die, but only a few of them get most of the matings. So maybe mom helps them get a date. Who knows? Further research required. And, you know, they're intensely social, long-lived, large-brained. It gets complicated, another story. So let's dip a hydrophone in the water and listen for a bit. Killer whales have a very highly developed auditory cortex in their very large brain. They produce whistles, which are tonal, variable, and usually used for close-range communication. For further long-range communication, they produce echolocation clicks, which are repeated slowly because it takes that click time to get out, reflect off the object they're interested in, and get back to them. However, pulse calls are taking those echolocation clicks and repeating them at an incredibly high rate, such that the frequency you're hearing is due more to that repetition rate than the frequency of the click. These calls become very complex, have very wideband harmonics, which you'll see soon in the sonograms. These calls are very stereotypic. They are individually distinct. They are learned, and they are amazingly stable. Killer whales that were put in captivity decades ago are still making the same calls that their families are making out in the wild. And these calls vary with behavioral context, the level of arousal of the individuals. So it turns out that residents feeding on salmon are very vocal when they're foraging because salmon can't hear them. They have a whole different other hearing system. So John Ford spent years recording all the resident pods in the area, and he discovered 4 distinct dialects among these pods, and that there was no call sharing among acoustic clans. This is extraordinary because just from surface observations and the photo ID, all these pods are all interacting with one another. You would never ever suspect that there was such a discrete division in their vocal repertoire. Yet here it is. Notice that in the A clan up here, in the northern community, you're having 3 clans. The A clan has all this call sharing amongst individual pods within the A clan. Same with the G clan and the R clan, the acoustic clans. And there's no lines connecting these groups. There's no call sharing. And then in southern Vancouver Island, the southern resident community has just another set of vocalizations. Again, no call sharing. So when a killer whale's making a call, in a way, he's sending out 5 messages. The clan or pod identity, probably individual identity, because they all hear each other their whole lives. They would know where they are, what they're doing, their activity level, and by context that we'll probably never ever really know unless we become killer whales. Many other messages are possible. So let's try this out. Here's an example of some 2 calls from the A clan. And, whoops, sorry. That work?
It sure did.
Oh, good. One more time. So you can kind of follow along and sing along if you want. It's a sonogram. The time is on the lower axis, frequencies in the upper axis. It's going to vary between different sonograms here. And see if you can follow along with this. 2 minutes? Oh my God, you're kidding. I do get wrapped up in these things. Okay, so you can see from all these sonograms that there's a lot of variability amongst the calls. Then one day, a whole bunch of different killer whale groups come in. They're transients. They just transit through the area, they eat marine mammals. They sound different. They don't interact with residents, mutual avoidance. And they have very different calls. And then there's a third group that comes into the area, the offshore killer whales. They travel much greater distances. They apparently eat sharks and rays and fish. They look very different. And they don't interact with the residents or transients. What's going on? So it turns out there's 3 different ecotypes in the North Pacific. An ecotype isn't a different species, it's a different race or type. As we've observed, they all have different morphologies. It turns out they're very genetically distinct. And here they are around the whole world, 10 different ecotypes around the world. And maybe there's an 11th ecotype now that's just been observed down off of the Mexican coast. The global genetics of killer whales has been now established, and we now have many, many different ecotypes that have formed in the last, say, 250,000 years. The killer whales have been in the fossil record for 5 million years. What's going on? Well, culture, in a word. I refer you to this this book here by Hal Whitehead, and it goes on into how genes and culture co-evolve with one another, and which is a fascinating topic now in animals as well as in humans. And so these resident killer whales are like a treasure, the best studied whale society in the world. Detailed information over the last 50 years has been accumulated for a long time. And we've only just begun to study most of the other ecotypes. And I hope this sets a context for Howard and how special these animals are and how much we know about them, even more than any whales that could be learned, what we can ever learn from whales in captivity. So thank you once again. And sure be fun to have questions, but we'll get to that somehow.
Thanks, Jeff. You can tell his obvious enthusiasm for that enlightening quick review about killer whale cultural biology. That was Jeff Jacobson of BioWaves, Inc. This is the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium brought to you by the Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study and KGUA Public Media in Wallala, 88.3 FM. We are simulcasting on YouTube and sharing the link to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Listen in worldwide at kgua.org, through our KGUA Air Pocket app, and on apps Radio Garden and TuneIn. This is Peggy's Place. I'm your host, Leanne Lindsey, and our next speaker is Orca Network's Howard Garrett, who will talk to us about 2 new J-Pod calves, the celebrations, implications, and observations. He began working as a field researcher with the Center for Whale Research on San Juan Island in 1981. The Orca Network is dedicated to raising awareness of the whales of the Pacific Northwest and the importance of providing them healthy and safe habitats. And if I just have to do one quick thing here, I'm going to just mute that mic and get ready for Howard here. Okay, so one more thing, that Jeff and his wife Susan founded the Orca Network in 2001, and it's a nonprofit organization based on Whidbey Island. Howard gives presentations on orca natural history, conservation, and captivity issues in Washington and beyond. And his focus is on the southern resident orcas of the Salish Sea and coastal waters, now down to only 73 members. Their diet has been primarily Chinook salmon for millennia. Now he's going to give us an insight on why Chinook are so crucial to their survival and what we can do to help them. Please welcome Howard Garrett to the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium. Howard, you're up.
Hello and good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Audio
Thank
good?
you, Howard. Welcome.
Great. Well, Jeff, wow, did you ever set the context? I mean, you gave the entire background. I'm so glad this is recorded. Everyone, please keep in mind every word Jeff said when you hear what I say about some recent calves that have just been born. So I will go ahead and proceed into screen sharing. And, oh yes, and share.
Have your presentation ready. There you go.
Right. And let's see, I need to maximize that, don't I?
Yeah, but from the
There we go.
Yep.
How's that? Can you see the map?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much, Howard.
Great. I am going to tell you about mainly the events of September 5th and the superpod, the birth of the baby and the superpod of September 5th, because I think what happened there that day was legendary. It was really amazing and it should go down in history. This map shows basically where it all took place. The day before, on September 4th, J-Pod was in Georgia Strait, up in the north area in Canada, where they had been for 5 days. K&L pods were somewhere out at sea, somewhere probably on Swiftsure Bank. You can see out on the western edge of the Strait of Juan de Fuca, which is a very productive area where southern residents and northern residents and transients and even offshores often forage, but they never interact. Remember what Jeff said, they don't interact. They have completely different language systems and cultures. So on the morning of September 5th, J-Pod was seen from San Juan Island, spread out, foraging, all the way down to Hind Bank. At about 11 a.m., Ks and Ls were reported coming in from the Pacific for the first time since July. About that time, J-Pod started trending southwest toward the Ks and Ls. That afternoon, anticipating a superpod, the Center for Whale Research launched 3 boats, 1 from Victoria and 2 from San Juan Island. Around 3:30, a whale watch naturalist noticed a blip next to J35, Tahlequah. When there's a newborn orca, a blip is all you see. The mother comes up in this smooth, graceful arc and this powerful blow. And then you see right next to the mom, a little blip, and that's the baby. So that was seen about 3:30 in the afternoon. So the Center for Whale Research confirmed that a new calf had been born to J35 and assigned its alphanumeric as J57. Its dorsal fin was upright, so it had probably been born about 12 to 24 hours earlier. J35 had been seen 2 days earlier without the calf. About 3 p.m., K&L pods started coming in at speed. They were clocked at 15 knots for a while. And these photos, by the way, are from the Center for Whale Research website, whaleresearch.com encounters. And I recommend everyone go there for a complete write-up of the encounters and the most amazing orca photos that you'll ever see anywhere. And it goes back many years, hundreds of encounters are in detail there. And they were starting to move in really fast into where J-Pod was, south of San Juan Island. And this is what it was about. J57 sees his first day in the world. And all 23 members of J-Pod were at that point, 23 members, were headed west, right toward K's and L pod, K's and L's that were coming in south of Victoria. And they met in the middle in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And here J35 and newborn J57 are with big brother J47, Notch. For the rest of the day and into the night, they frolicked. They breached, they mixed and mingled, they spy hopped, they rolled around on each other, no doubt making babies. They spread out over several miles, and they weren't foraging for food that entire time. They were there to party. They were having some kind of celebration. And if you do go to the Center for Whale Research website and look for that encounter, you'll find a video that shows by far better the kind of socialization that was going on, the socializing, the mixing and mingling, the super potting, that, as it's called. It was really fantastic. And there was also a blog there by Lodi Budwill, who was out in the boat with Ken Balcom at the time, to document the whales. And she wrote a very inspired blog about some amazing events that took place that day. And word spread immediately. Within an hour, it was in the Seattle Times. The next morning, it was in the New York Times. Everybody was extremely excited, including the whales. You could tell by their behavior. They weren't their usual busy foraging selves. They weren't just, spread out and looking for fish in every nook and cranny they could find. They were playing, they were socializing, they were glad to see each other. They were having a very good time. And this birth was especially meaningful because in 2018, that same mom, J35, Tahlequah, had carried her deceased newborn on her rostrum, on her head, basically, for 17 days of sadness. That's been called a tour of grief. It brought the attention of the world to the fact that these orcas are in trouble. They're hurting. They're not getting enough to eat. They're suffering reproductive failures. So it was encouraging to see that she was now able to bring a healthy new calf into the world. And of course, the whales remember 2 years ago too. They were there. They experienced it in whatever way orcas would experience something like that. And so they were celebrating. Maybe they were encouraged and just so happy to see that J35 was able to bring a healthy newborn into the world. They sure looked like they were celebrating anyway. They were all bunched up and touchy-feely groups, and that mostly included members of all three pods. So they were mixing and greeting and sort of reconfirming those relationships. On September 22nd, J35's new calf, J57, was ID'd as a male from this photo. And you can just barely see the belly markings. That made news throughout the region as well. But males are not our first choice because boys don't have babies and we need a lot of new babies. So, it's good to know, but we'd like to see more females. Of the 43 calves that have been born into the southern residence since 1998, 27 are males and 15 are females. So there's a real strong bias toward having males for some reason. It's not really understood, but it doesn't help the population grow that much. And then on September 24th, J41 Eclipse gave birth to her calf, her new calf, J58. And this time the dorsal fin was flopped over when they were first seen, which means that that calf had been born just minutes before it was seen. It was first seen by a whale watch naturalist and then confirmed again by the Center for Whale Research. And happy to report that they were seen again October 17th. That baby seems to be doing just fine. Isn't that the cutest little baby orca you ever did see? So all of that is very good news. And to sort of add to what Jeff was saying about natural history, their pregnancy lasts about 18 months. That's a long time, twice as long as humans, of course. Orca babies are about 8 feet long when they're born and weigh about 400 pounds. And their brains are already 3 times the size of our adult human brains. So they've been listening to orca chatter. Their auditory senses are, of course, very well developed. Their primary sense, their way of getting around in the world is by sound, by sending echolocation and hearing it. So they've been hearing their chatter, orca chatter of their family for probably about a year already. So they've learned the language before they're even born and before they can even make a sound. So the question often comes up, who's the daddy? Well, we don't know until the genetic work is done from the fecal studies, but from those studies previously, L41 has been one of the prolific daddies, you could say. And as Jeff mentioned, only a few of the males are the major sources, the major fathers of pretty much all of them. And since J1 died, L41 has been the major source of most of the babies. So he could very well have been the daddy of those 2 babies and many more. Sadly, he left us in late 2019. So he's no longer there, and we don't know which males will be doing the daddies now. This photo shows him and L85, another adult male, babysitting a day-old calf, L124, who could have been another of his progeny back in January 2019. 2 new calves were born in early 2019, one in L pod and one in J pod, and both are still doing very well as far as we know. So that's a very good sign. 2 calves from 2019, 2 from this year. But those were the first calves that have been born and survived since 2015. So why so many successful births lately after such a long lack of any new babies? Well, here's an illustration that gives a sense of what is a La Nina event, which is cooler water. And that surface water in the Gulf of Alaska, the whole Northeast Pacific, is very good for salmon. A lot more salmon can live in cooler water. So maybe there was just enough food. They seem to have had enough food in the last 2 years or so to be able to do quite well. It's impossible to say really why there are more calves now than there have been before. There are so many different variables. It's all really speculation, but that La Nina is probably a part of the reason that there are at least sufficient salmon. But overall, salmon populations along the East Pacific are in bad shape. They have been in decline for 100 to 150 years. And that because the Southern residents focus so almost exclusively on Chinook salmon, the biggest, the highest calorie content of all the salmon. And those are the salmon that are most especially in trouble. So it's really no wonder. This map of the Salish Sea is perfect. This is the definitive map that got the the Salish Sea named the Salish Sea, and for some reason that I really like, it includes the Columbia River. And that is where most of those salmon come from. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up here so that we can get on to the next speaker, to London. And just want to say that we need to clear up the rivers in the Columbia River. We need to remove those dams, basically. I can go into a whole advocacy area here about how and why we need to remove the 4 dams on the Snake River to open up 5,500 miles of prime salmon habitat. And we'll do more about that. And by the way, your representative, Jared Huffman, probably wants to do that from indications I've seen, but, oh, it says Columbia. Well, Columbia River is what that is. But, you know, he needs to have the Washington delegation to advocate that as well.
Thank you for that very
I'll leave you
informative
with that.
update. Yes, thank you so much, Howard. And what beautiful photos of those 2 new J-Pod calves. Thank you so much. That's Howard Garrett of the Orca Network. This is the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium brought to you by the Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study and KGUA Public Media in Wallala 88.3 FM. We are simulcasting this symposium from Zoom to our YouTube TV channel and sharing the link to our Facebook and Instagram pages. We stream worldwide at kgua.org and on our KGUA Air Pocket app and on apps Radio Garden and TuneIn. This is Peggy's Place. I'm your host, Leigh Lindsey, and our next speaker is a talented and composed young woman named London, who is going to talk about the first resident leopard seal population outside of the Antarctic. London Fletcher is a 13-year-old with a keen eye to the planet's future. She has become involved in a flagship environmental issue, the plight of the southern resident killer whales. For the past 7 years, she has tirelessly advocated on behalf of the southern resident killer whales. She is a research assistant at the Orca Research Trust in New Zealand and the principal researcher at her own nonprofit, the Aquatic Research Conservancy. She is probably the youngest person ever to earn an internship in cetology, which she completed with Dr. Ingrid Visser at the Orca Research Trust in New Zealand during the summer of 2017. London is also the youngest member of the Society of Marine Mammalogy, as well as the youngest member of the American Acoustical Society. Please welcome to the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium, London Fletcher. And let's see if we've got your mic on. London, there you are. We can. Take it away.
Great. So I will be presenting on leopard seals, as has already been stated, and I'm just really honored to be here. So let me try to share this. Is that, can you see my?
We sure can. That's perfect.
So I've already been introduced, but I'd like to just start off with a little bit about how I got into this, into researching leopard seals. So when I interned in New Zealand in 2017, I began working on this project to document these leopard seals that were showing up. And so since then, I've been working on this, and the paper on this got published in 2019, and we are still documenting the leopard seal population. But this presentation isn't about me. It is about leopard seals. So let's get into that. So leopard seals are widely distributed around the southern hemisphere, but they're in the Antarctic and the Antarctic sea ice. They also populate subantarctic islands, South America, South Africa, and Australia, and New Zealand, and all of the lowest latitudes. And in the beginning, the leopard seals were very curious. We saw only one, but she would always come up to boats and passerbys and poke her head out of the water, which was it's almost a very frightening thing to see, as interesting as it is, because they are very, very big and have many teeth. But back then, she would also just chill on beaches, and you can see that they would close off beaches as to prevent civilians from getting harmed by her, since this is a predator. She would also mainly haul out at marinas, and when we saw her, she was more often than not asleep. After being in the Auckland region for over a year, she was given a name. So this is her Maori name that I'm not going to pronounce fully because I know I'm going to butcher it, but for short we call her Ofa, and it translates to treasured gift from our ancestors. So the Maori population in New Zealand took her unusual presence as almost a spiritual thing. And a lot of times she obstructed access in marinas, so she would block access from boats, which led people to be very upset. So we were told that she doesn't belong here. But her unusual presence heralded a new era of research. So like any competent researchers, we went to Google. But a lot of the records we saw, they were seasonal, they were immature, or they were in poor condition. And a lot of the times they were sporadic and just overall evidence of non-residency. And we didn't see any births from Google. But we had more questions. So is this just in Otago, New Zealand, or is it in the entirety of New Zealand? So we searched many databases for trying to look for historical records of leopard seals, social media, museums, all sorts of things. And we founded our own organization to document this, called leopardseals.org. So leopardseals.org is a for-profit organization that consists of scientists, volunteers, and we conduct research and education and advocacy for the leopard seal population in New Zealand. So from museums, we found lots of very historical records, which was unexpected. And we can see them over the years. Some of them are a little more concerning than others, what the people were doing, because this is an apex predator and it is not that safe to be so close to them. And we found many records, some of them more concerning than others, leopard seals looking slightly maimed, which is very concerning, which leads me to our next point, their occurrence in New Zealand. So across the world, they are not that frequently seen outside the Antarctic. So we have a few records from all over the world, and this is, for some reason, it is not advancing. So we see them in Australia, only 7 records. And the New Zealand Leopard Seal Database, or the NZLSD for short, the records from 12,000 to 219 are 3,000 records, which the New Zealand Leopard Seal Database of leopard seal sightings worldwide is the largest one. And leopard seal sightings have increased greatly over the years. But so there is we need to see specific things from the population for them to be considered resident. So they cannot be immature or in poor condition or seasonal or sporadic. That is not evidence of residency. So they're immature. And so we can see that the majority of them were non-adult. And poor condition, so their spine and ribs are showing in here and they look very emaciated. We do not want to see this. We don't see it often, but it is very concerning when we do. And in fair condition, only their ribs are showing. You can see that a leopard seal in good condition should have a sort of nice torpedo shape about them. And in excellent condition, there should be a fat layer over the hips. And you shouldn't see any protruding bones. So we had many in good or excellent condition. But also these were slightly seasonal, but we did see them all year round with peaks in spring and winter. And they were slightly sporadic, but they were all over the entirety of New Zealand, which showed maybe they are resident. which leads us to our next point. So in order for them to be considered resident, we need to start off with seeing how many individuals there are, and if we are seeing these individuals again, or if it's a one-time thing. And this led me to start the photo ID of leopard seals. So unlike Orca, we need many more photos of them to properly identify them. So we need a face left, a face right, a body left, a body right, and their belly. We can also identify them through their pelage, which is markings. And so far, we have identified all of these individuals. So there are over 200 individuals identified, and there are still more. So this is so we're wondering, how long has OFA been here? So the first set of observations relate to a trip on the 7th of October, 2012. And so through markings, we found that this is OFA, this record from 2012, because OFA has a V-shaped scar on the side of her mouth, and she also has 2 lateral marks on her back, which we don't know what they're caused by, but we're presuming propeller marks. And so we can see the same scars showing 7 years later. Before OFA, the longest recorded residency was in 4 months, and it was in Georgia, outside the Antarctic. So she has been here for 7 years and counting. She is still in New Zealand today. And so this leads us to our next form of residency is births. So we thought that there have been no births outside the Antarctic, but actually that is false because we saw a birth, but that went unpublished. And so we can see multiple births happening, and I think there are, as of now, 5 pubs. Don't quote me on that, but which leads us into our next point, their conservation status, because they are a very important species. And so we can classify them as resident now because we can see that they do not match the vagrant profile. And so the Department of Conservation classified OFA and all of her leopard seal companions as resident in 2019, which was a great accomplishment because it showed that our research efforts weren't in vain. Which leads us into our next step for research on this resident population. So we want to know their occurrence and their movement. So are sightings increasing? How far do they travel? And where are they? And also we want to know, what are the seals eating while they're here? We can, so leopard seals in New Zealand, we're not sure what they're eating exactly, but we know in the Antarctic they feed on penguins and other marine mammals. And they also have specialized teeth that are made to filter and krill. That's why you can see the ridges on her teeth. That is what they're for. So far we have identified a few prey items from scat analysis. So feathers, bones, scales, fur, animal remains, and other things. And this is a fun anecdote, but leopard seal poops out a USB drive. So it went through her digestive tract, and we found it when we were collecting a scat sample 2 years later. So crazy. It's honestly very remarkable. And also, because unfortunately we do find quite a few deceased leopard seals, we have started to build a necropsy database, which we can find more about the health of the population thanks to the Otago Museum. And this is a seal getting an MRI, the pup. But there are also many threats that the leopard seal population of New Zealand are facing. And so there are natural injuries, but there are also human-induced ones, and you can see very clearly the difference here. The human-induced injuries look far more intentional. And here we can see a leopard seal that died. And when scanning it for the autopsy, we found hundreds and hundreds of small bullets, small shotgun pellets. So there's no way that is a natural threat. And so OFA was injured by a suspected firearm in 2019, so last year. And this led to a lot of questions about how we were going to help her, if we needed to capture her temporarily to check this out, but it actually ended up healing on its own, which was quite remarkable. So we've been doing research on management, so how humans and leopard seals can coexist, because that is an important part of it. And so we have set up public guidelines for encountering leopard seals. So many people, when they see a leopard seal, they think of a big, scary, menacing predator. So this image is from the movie Happy Feet, and we can see a leopard seal and the red eyes. It looks very threatening, and the large teeth. But the reality of it is that leopard seals, they aren't trying to actively go out of their way to hurt people. They will not hurt people unless disturbed. They honestly just want to sleep. And so these public guidelines are stay at least 20 meters away, keep dogs away because and also do not touch them. They will present very threatening behavior. Do not feed the leopard seals, and just overall do not disturb them. And so we have set up a reporting hotline with leopardseals.org. And so we need the date, the times first and last seen, the location detailed so that we can possibly find them if there are people on close to or on site, and if scat is present, and the approximate length of a leopard seal. So if you guys want to follow along with leopardseal.org's research, here are our social medias. And thank you for listening. So I have included my email and my Instagram if you would like to ask me questions or keep in touch with me. And thank you so much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing.
Leigh, you seem to be muted.
Sorry about that. It seems that I was muted on my end. I was just saying that that was a very impressive presentation from London Fletcher, and it was about the first resident leopard seal population outside the Atlantic and how to connect with her. That was London Fletcher again, who has her own nonprofit Aquatic Research Conservancy. Thanks to our other two speakers today, Jeff Jacobson of BioWaves Inc. and Orca Network's Howard Garrett, who shared with us killer whale biology and gave us an update on 2 new J-Pod calves and the ensuing celebration and implications of that event. That concludes day 1 of the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium, brought to you by Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study and KGUA Public Media in Molalla, located at the junction of both Mendocino and Sonoma coasts. We are simulcasting this Zoom symposium on our YouTube channel and sharing to our Facebook and Instagram pages. You can hear us online at KGUA.org, through our Air Pocket app by Radio Rethink, or on apps Radio Garden and TuneIn. Stay tuned for the rest of the week for more of the 2020 Ocean Life Symposium on Peggy's Place. Here's a quick rundown before we go to the top of the hour. Tomorrow, Tuesday, October 27th, our speakers and topics include the Ocean Foundation's Richard Charter, who will give us an informative presentation on defending our planet and being one with nature during a time of broken promises. Ocean Conservation Research's Michael Stalker will present What Was That Sound? Acoustical adaptations to the ocean's dark and wet environment. And University of New Hampshire's Carter Mercer, Scott's nephew, who will talk to us about the housing market response to sea level rise. On Wednesday, October 28th, it's the University of the Redlands Tessa Foster, Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's Marianne Long, and Toyon Research Corporation's Christina Tombach Wright. They will talk about the effects of warming waters on marine mammals in the Southern California Bight, how awareness inspires conservation, and emerging technologies for marine mammal research. The last day of the symposium, Thursday, October 29th, it's the Noyo Center for Marine Sciences' Sarah Grimes, who will talk to us about what or who has washed ashore in 2020. Blue Planet Strategies' Zack Klyver will give us two presentations, one on the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale and another on the pursuit for ropeless fishing for lobster and crab. Wrapping up the week is a conversation with Scott and Tree Mercer, and KGUA's founder and general manager and host of Peggy's Place, Peggy Berryhill, who will review some of the things we've learned this week. A little more about Peggy is that she is a multi-award-winning Native American producer, radio producer, journalist, and was the first Indigenous female journalist on National Public Radio. That's all right here from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific, repeating every day, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. this entire week. We are simulcasting on KGUA in Molalla 88.3 FM, which streams around the world at kgua.org and on our new YouTube TV channel, which we did share on our Facebook and Instagram pages. If you'd like to catch this event at a future date, note that each day's event will be saved on the KGUA YouTube channel. Tune in tomorrow, same time, same place. That's it for Peggy's Place. I'm host and producer Leigh Lindsey, and it's time now for us to move on over to Native America Calling from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we are going to pull them up in just a moment right here at KGUA. It's 10 o'clock, and it is Monday, October the 26th, 2020. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to now end meeting for all.